Hello my dear subscribers. I'm pleased to welcome you to my YouTube channel dedicated to author stories. Enjoy listening.
Christian sat in a taxi, observing how the city, which just a few months ago was vibrant around him, was becoming increasingly faded. It was as if life was leaving the city along with the autumn colors. All the people bustling around him held no interest for him. He gazed at the entire city, immersed in some darkness, trapped in an endless cycle. He wished for this damn cycle to end. He was headed to his father's place to talk to him, to reason with him, to protect him from a rather unpleasant step his father was preparing for. Christian noticed that the taxi turned into a residential area. That meant he would soon be close to his father's huge house. He could only hope that his father's new, gorgeous wife, who didn't care about him at all, wouldn't be in that house. He wanted that girl, who suddenly appeared in his father's life, to vanish, and he hoped his father would file for a divorce. Because what his father was doing had gone way beyond any limits. Christian remembered the time when his mother was alive, and everything was good for her. She was deeply in love with his father and forgave him for everything, even his constant infidelity. As Christian grew up, he constantly criticized his father for it, saying that his mother probably got sick because of the way Eric treated her. Whenever they discussed this, Eric would shout and lash out at his son, but they would eventually find words to reconcile. However, now something told Christian that reconciliation wouldn't happen this time. "Where do I turn now?" the confused taxi driver asked, realizing he had lost his way among these identical houses. "Turn right. There will be a white fence, stop near it, please," Christian said. The taxi driver's voice pulled him back from his memories, back to the present where he was about to have a difficult conversation with his father. Christian looked around out of habit and thought that all these cookie-cutter houses, all these identical cottages bought by people wanting to show off their success and wealth, had become tiresome. He didn't want to come here, didn't want to see his so-called brothers who thrived in this environment. It all reminded him of the life he once had. But when his father brought home another young lover, barely older than Christian himself, and that lover started throwing her weight around, it turned into a nightmare. He couldn't live like that. Since his father had become quite strong after his wife's funeral, he started bringing home young girls. Christian realized he couldn't bear it anymore. He simply packed his things and moved out, preferring to work and live in a rented apartment rather than depending on his father, who constantly brought home new girls, making living with them nearly impossible. He looked at his father and couldn't believe this was the same man who raised him, the one who at least tried to spend time with him, even though his mother took on most of the parenting responsibility. Thoughts about his mother made Christian a little uneasy. He called, and someone answered through the intercom, telling him to leave. And then Christian himself opened the door and went inside. He saw how much the courtyard had changed. Apparently, his father's new woman had not only taken on the renovation inside the house, but also the remodeling of the yard, which his mother had once loved so much and which was now being barbarically transformed. "Coming quickly, it's freezing outside," Mr. Eric said, opening the door. He noticed that Christian was standing and looking in the direction where his mother's flower bed used to be. There, all sorts of exotic flowers would bloom, the ones his mother would plant and nurture. It used to bloom with everything she touched. Now, there was some frozen pit, apparently being prepared for a fountain installation. Mr. Eric had no intention of mentioning it. His reasoning was completely different. His reasoning diverged from what his son was thinking. Mr. Eric would say that the most important thing was that he was happy. That everything was fine for him now, and he had no intention of changing anything. If his new wife wanted to simply redo everything upside down, let her. It was just another entertainment for her. "Listen, Dad, I need to talk to you." Of course, I could ask you to listen to me, to have a proper conversation with me, but I know it's impossible. In 10 minutes of our conversation, you'll start yelling at me and throw me out the door. But I have to talk to you, Christian said. You came so I could kick you out onto the street? Someday I'll end these conversations. Someday I'll finally get rid of you. I'm sorry that you turned from obedient, normal son into what you've become. Mr. Eric said sharply. He walked away, got whiskey from the bar, poured it into a glass without diluting it. He didn't even put ice in it, drinking it all in one gulp. He poured himself another portion, offered it to his son, but he shook his head. Mr. Eric was clearly more disappointed that his son came not just for a visit but to have some conversation again. He seemed to be much more upset than Christian himself had expected. He looked at his son with disappointment, longing, and resentment. I saw your wife with a man, and believe me, they're not just friends. He's not her coach, brother, or relative. What can she possibly tell you? She's cheating on you. Instead of finally taking off your rose-colored glasses and facing the truth, you're kicking me out onto the street. Christian said. Stop making up all these stories. Every time you come up with some new nonsense just so I would leave her, so we would break up, so our relationship would fall apart. So that you can get what you want. Mr. Eric said. Again, you came to create a rift between us? Aren't you tired of acting like a little child yourself? You're a grown man. Let him decide for himself who he wants to live with, who he wants to be with, who he wants to stand up for. Viola shouted as she descended the stairs. Christian rolled his eyes. He had intended to talk to his father. He didn't want to interact with Viola at all, who, unfortunately, happened to be at home. She smirked brazenly. Apparently, she understood that no matter what Christian said, it would be useless anyway. Because she would find any means to make Eric believe her. I came to talk to my father, not to listen to you. Christian said sharply. I don't care. This is my home. He is my husband. I will decide who to answer to in my own house, whom to kick out onto the street. I want you to leave. I want you to never come back with your stupid conversations. Viola said. Christian looked at his father, who nodded. And that nod completely shattered Christian into pieces. On the one hand, he perfectly understood that his father would always be on the side of his new wife. But he didn't expect him to agree to kick Christian out without even finishing the conversation. He calmly put on his jacket, went outside, and called a taxi again as soon as he left the gate. He didn't expect his father to be so unquestioningly submissive to her. He stood there for about 10 minutes, but the taxi never came. So Christian took the challenge and simply started walking. He wondered how the conversation would have ended, what had happened. And why his father, having such a huge business, having built such a huge empire, couldn't see the fraud who literally bloomed next to him. When he recovered from the shock, lost in his own thoughts, he realized that he couldn't even move a few meters away from the house. But if he had known what would happen next, he would have surely acted differently that evening. Right before his eyes, he saw a little baby being thrown into a snowdrift from a car. The vehicle sped away. Christian, not fully understanding what was happening, rushed towards the tiny baby. He grabbed him, tucked him into his jacket, and hurried to the police station. He literally ran to the police station because that was the only place where they could find out who the baby belonged to. He couldn't wrap his head around how someone could just take a baby and throw him into a snowdrift. And now, as he thought about it, thoughts of his father and his wife completely faded from his mind. He walked along the snow-covered street because he couldn't run anymore. His frozen legs begged for rest, and all he wanted now was to be in a warm place as soon as possible. He held the baby tightly against himself, who had stopped crying, to the point that he couldn't even reach his phone in his pocket to call a taxi and finally reach the police station. But there were only a few kilometers left. Summoning his last bit of strength, he started moving. He ran again towards the police station, wanting to cover this distance as quickly as possible. There were hardly any people on the street. The night, which was descending so rapidly, seemed to have driven everyone off the streets. Christian, who was now only thinking about the baby, suddenly realized that what had happened was probably not a coincidence. He believed in fate, believed that everyone gets what they deserve. Now, as he carried this little child, his world was gradually crumbling. He couldn't understand what this tiny creature had done to deserve being abandoned in a snowdrift. And what would have happened if he hadn't thought so deeply? If he had already gone far from his father's house, if a taxi had arrived, he wouldn't have seen what happened at all. As soon as he entered the police station, he handed over the baby, gave his statement, signed some documents, and now he was simply sitting in the waiting room, waiting for his acquaintance who worked here. When a fairly young police officer approached him, Christian was relieved and shook his hand firmly. "How did you end up being involved in all this trouble?" his friend exclaimed, returning the firm handshake. "I don't know. I left my father's place, got lost in deep thoughts. Realized I was just stuck there. I was creating a whole mess for myself. And suddenly, I see a car pulling up, and they toss a little baby right into the snowdrift. I didn't even have time to think. I grabbed the baby and ran here," Christian recounted. "I have some news for you, but I won't talk about them now. It's a complicated matter. I can't be certain if this is the same child. We have some leads. I actually wanted to talk to you about it yesterday. But as you can see, fate has brought me to you. Please go home and listen to me. Don't go to your father anymore. Don't tempt fate. Let us finish the investigation. I'll come to you in a few days, and we'll talk." "Sound good?" his friend suggested. Christian nodded. They talked a little about work, completely avoiding mentioning the little kid who was left out in the cold. And when the taxi finally arrived, Christian headed home. He was thinking about what had happened just a few hours ago. How could this whole situation, which clearly didn't promise anything good, end? Christian kept replaying in his mind the cruelty with which they threw the little child out onto the street. And overall, what could it mean? Was it somehow connected to him or his father? He didn't fully grasp what his friend had told him, and now his thoughts were getting tangled. When the car stopped, Christian went up to the apartment and kissed his girlfriend, who was already sleeping. He felt a pang of guilt for making her wait. He sat in the kitchen, made himself some coffee, and immersed himself in his thoughts, which clearly wouldn't let him sleep. He felt turmoil inside him when he thought about the child who could have frozen to death in the snowdrift, and they would have found his frozen body in the morning. It was as if fate forced him to slow down there, to stay in that place, walking circles in one spot. "You came home so late," said Angelica, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "Sorry, I wanted to talk to my father, but his wife intervened, and it all ended badly. She threw me out of the house and told me never to come back. And you know what my father did?" He just nodded. "He has always been a lousy person. But somehow, after my mother's death, his nastiness has only gotten worse," Christian admitted. "Leave him be. He can't be what you want him to be. He is who he is. Maybe she's not such a bad person. Maybe he just wants to feel loved. He wants to feel a part of the relationship he now has. Maybe he just doesn't want to hear what you're telling him. Perhaps he wants you to accept him and his choices without lecturing him," Angelica suggested. "Yeah, I know, but I still can't do anything about it. I see with my own eyes how he's being deceived, how he's being taken advantage of. It hurts me to realize that every time we meet, instead of having a normal father-son conversation, I start talking about his viola, urging him to leave his beloved, Christian confessed. And also, when I left my father's house, I was so deep in thought that I just stood there. I walked just a couple of meters, and I saw a car approaching, and they threw a little naked baby out of it right into the snowdrift. Can you imagine? I thought such things only happen in cheap melodramas. I picked up the child and ran to the police. I was freezing like crazy until I got there. I couldn't even get my phone out because I wrapped the little one in my jacket and I didn't want to fumble in the cold. And what did the police say? Angelica asked in horror. He saw that this news deeply affected her. She looked at him with some fear in her eyes, as if the news about the child was much more important than what Christian had told her about his father. Alex said it somehow connected either to me or to my father. I still don't get it. He asked me to just go home and not visit my father, to quote him literally, let them finish their business, Christian said. Angelica shrugged because she also didn't understand the meaning of those words. She looked at her boyfriend, who looked crushed. She wanted to at least cheer him up a bit, give him some support. But it seemed impossible. He was immersed in his own memories. He only thought about helping his father get rid of that girl. But because he delved so deeply into these thoughts, he stopped noticing what he had and his own family. Angelica saw that Christian was getting more deeply involved in his father's affairs, trying his best to ruin his marriage, completely forgetting that he had proposed to her. And now, every time the conversation turned to the wedding, he simply postponed it. She didn't bring it up because she knew that after everything that happened tonight, almost in the middle of the night, talking to Christian about something like that was pointless. When the next day the same police officer, whom Christian had spoken to, came to their place, Angelica was greatly surprised. She didn't expect that the story with the child would actually be connected to her boyfriend. When they suddenly went into the kitchen and closed the door behind them, she realized that they didn't want to involve her in that conversation, and strange thoughts crept into her mind. She suddenly thought that maybe she was just another victim of Christian. What if he actually had another woman? And now this child was his. What if he had cheated on her? They deliberately threw this child in front of him. She sat down and forced herself to snap out of these disgusting thoughts. She entered the bedroom, positioned herself close to the wall, and pressed her ear against it to hear every detail of their conversation. The apartment walls were thin, and they couldn't speak completely discreetly. Angelica knew that Christian was aware that she would probably overhear the whole conversation. If he wanted to hide something from her, he would have likely gone outside to talk to the police officer. They closed the door not to block her access to information, but simply to have a private conversation. Well, I have 2 pieces of news for you, and none of them are good. I know your father is quite a womanizer. Yes, probably the whole town knows how unstable and inconsistent he is in that regard. To put it briefly, that child you found in the snowdrift is actually your brother, said the police officer. What do you mean, my brother? I had a sister, or rather, I still have. But she has been abroad for about 15 years. I haven't seen her in a very long time. How could I have a brother if my mother? He trailed off. Christian understood what was happening. It was his half-brother from his father's side. He covered his face with his hands, leaned back on the chair's backrest, and let out a loud scream that echoed through the entire apartment. He couldn't understand how they could throw a baby right in front of his eyes. And now he desperately tried to figure out why it happened. He replayed over and over again, like frames from a movie, everything that had happened. And he realized that they had deliberately thrown the child so close to his home, probably to prove something. And they simply didn't see him because Christian was standing just around the corner. And it so happened that those who approached from the other side probably didn't see him behind the tall fence. It was nighttime, and the area wasn't well lit. Your father had an affair with some girl who became pregnant and gave birth to the child. Your stepmother. I don't know how to put it correctly, because she's younger than you, apparently found out about the existence of this heir, of which Mr. Eric is still unaware. Right now, I can't tell you everything, but I can guarantee that she orchestrated it all. It seems they kidnapped the child after the mother's death. She decided to throw the baby right under the house so that it would be found, so that everything would come to light, but no one would suspect her. Maybe she wanted to get rid of other potential heirs? Maybe she wanted to prove to your father that cheating on her was pointless. I don't know, Alex said. Christian didn't say anything again. The information burned into his brain like a branding iron. He looked at his friend, who just shrugged his shoulders. He couldn't say anything to him. He didn't want to talk to him at all, because all he wanted now was to get up and rush to his father to tell him everything. Angelic, who had heard the entire conversation, simply slumped against the wall. She was in such shock from what she had heard that she couldn't even tear herself away, continuing to listen to the conversation. But everything else she heard just didn't make sense in her mind. She heard the information, but it kept slipping away, not staying in her memory. And when Alex left, Angelic didn't even notice. Christian entered the room and saw his girlfriend sitting on her knees, leaning against the wall. He realized that she had heard everything perfectly. To be completely honest, he knew that she was eavesdropping on the conversation. But he wasn't angry with her, not even upset. I don't know what to do now, Christian said. I can't leave everything as it is. I have to tell my father. If he doesn't listen to me, then so be it. But at least I will be at peace knowing that I told him and did everything I could. Now that he knows the truth, he can decide for himself what to do. But I can't just leave everything like this anymore. Christian, wait! Angelic shouted. But he didn't hear her anymore. He got up and rushed off into the distance, heading straight to his car, which he had just picked up from the workshop yesterday. He barely had time to warm it up, slammed the gas pedal to the floor, and the car screeched away. Angelic could only watch from the balcony. She felt that it wouldn't end well. Christian raced through the icy streets of the city, barely noticing how poor the traction was. As soon as he stopped near his father's house, he immediately pounded on the gate. But this time, no one opened it. Instead, his father came out to meet him. "Dad, your Viola is not who she pretends to be," Christian shouted. But his father didn't hear him. He angrily slammed the gate, and Christian was left on the street. "Dad, Diana got pregnant by you, and she died. And your Viola hired people to throw the baby into a snowdrift right next to your house. I saved that child, and the police have him now." Christian suddenly realized that his cry had an effect. He froze, as if that freezing could somehow help him. He listened quietly and suddenly understood that his father, who apparently was heading towards the house, was now frozen in place. There was no sound of snow crunching under his steps, no muttering, grumbling, or expressions of outrage from his father. A ringing silence hung in the air. Christian could hear the icy branches of the trees knocking against each other, creating a barely perceptible ringing that one can only encounter in winter. When the gate opened again, his father stood right in front of him. His face seemed dark, as if it had filled with grief, and he now looked at Christian, apparently finding it hard to believe what he had said. "I know you're far from being a perfect father. You always had mistresses. But the situation is simply terrible now. It's not about me anymore. It's not about the mistresses. It's about a tiny baby who was thrown naked into a snowdrift. Do you understand?" Christian continued, hoping to reach his father's frozen heart. "It's time to go. They're waiting for you at the police station. We have to get the baby back before they send him to an orphanage." "Dad, he's your son." "He's my brother." The man who was still standing at the gate looked at Christian. He nodded at him, and then Christian understood that his father wanted to keep everything a secret from his new wife. He yelled at his son, but the yell was not the same as before. He slammed the gate, cursing his son. And now Christian realized that his father had done all this so that Viola, who apparently could watch him or who knows what else, wouldn't suspect anything. And now he wanted to make sure she remained clueless. Christian got into his car and drove home to tell Angelic everything, because it seemed to him that he had finally managed to reach his father. The next day, Christian learned that his father did not pick up the baby but instead kicked out Viola, who was immediately taken to the police. That was good news. They would have to deal with everything else gradually. Christian sat in the kitchen, watching his wife chop salad. And he thought about how he would have to relive all of this again. Because if his father didn't pick up the baby, he would have to do it himself. He wouldn't allow his brother, albeit half-brother, to grow up in an orphanage. "Do you think we can handle it?" Christian asked. He was afraid that Angelic would reject him since they had wanted their own child. And now, to take a baby who not only wasn't just some foster child, but was Christian's actual brother. "We both work, we have a good income. Why wouldn't we be able to handle it? We have good savings. I think we can manage all of this. Just in case, talk to your father again. Because I feel like he's waiting for that," Angelic said. Christian nodded. A few days later, he went to his father to have a proper conversation with him. Now he was certain that the conversation would happen. Now, when he saw his father, he couldn't recognize him. His face used to be filled with anger whenever his son visited. But now, all that his face expressed was sorrow, disappointment, and horror, as if he was reliving everything he had been told at the police station. "You came to talk about the baby, right? You know, he doesn't even have a name. Can you imagine? She died in childbirth. And I didn't even know she was pregnant. We did a DNA test, I'm the father. And I had no idea," Mr. Eric spoke. "I'm preparing the nursery right now, I'll pick him up soon. Even though I don't think I can handle it. To hell with it. I'll hire a nanny if I have to, even 10 of them. But I won't let my son grow up in an orphanage. I know you came here to talk about the baby, to discuss all of this. But I already understand everything. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. I know you did it not out of malice. But I hope this will be a lesson for you. That you won't make similar mistakes again. And I also hope that you'll recover soon because you're a young father again," Christian said joyfully, patting his father on the shoulder. He smiled, his smile was truly sincere. Seeing his father's genuine smile, Christian also smiled. It was as if all the situations had been resolved right now. He brewed tea, as he used to do, and set various treats on the table. They were sitting with his father, just like a long time ago, drinking tea, indulging in sweets, laughing, reminiscing about moments from their childhood. Both of them were happy in those moments. They also remembered when they were happy together with Christian's mother, when they were a strong family. But every time Mr. Eric recalled that, sooner or later it led him to sadness. "You know, when she ended up in the police, I found out a lot about her. You were right, I had rose-colored glasses on, I absolutely didn't want to see who she really was. Turns out, her name isn't even Viola. I'll tell you more, after everything that happened, I just wanted to kill her right there in prison. And now they won't let me near her because they're afraid I'll snap her neck," Mr. Eric recounted. "So, what else did they tell you at the police?" asked Christian, who was genuinely curious about how the whole story would end. "It turns out she's not who she claims to be. She has a guy with whom they deceive other men and women who have means. They extract money from them, get divorced, engage in various manipulations, and blackmail. In the end, they pool all the money together. They are real millionaires there, and it's never enough for them. Turns out, they simply wanted to poison me. To take everything away from me completely," Mr. Eric explained. "But what does the child have to do with this? When I saw her with that guy, I immediately thought that something was off because they were talking about something, discussing something. But why did she suddenly decide to get rid of the baby?" Christian asked again, not understanding how cruel someone had to be to take a naked baby and throw it out in the cold. "That's a separate story. She found out that a girl got pregnant by me, even though I didn't know myself. Diana apparently had a feeling that she would die during childbirth. She wrote me a letter, but it didn't reach me. When Viola found out that Diana was pregnant and about to give birth, she immediately came up with a plan that I knew everything and that I had been deceiving her. That I actually wanted to give everything I have to my heir, who was about to be born. Especially considering that it would be a boy. And she decided to do what she did. Simply hired people, they kidnapped the baby, and left him near my house. So that when the child was found, the first thing they would think about was me. The baby had a tag on his leg, you just didn't notice it," Mr. Eric said. There was a silence that felt sharp. There was no tranquility in this silence, no bliss. Both of them were lost in their own thoughts. Mr. Eric was thinking about how his own little son nearly died because of him. Christian was thinking about how a woman managed to manipulate a man who never feared anyone. He cheered up his father and changed the subject. They had a productive conversation about work, discussing the development of their business. Mr. Eric even proposed that Christian enter the business and establish his own branches to create a separate company. The conversation about work, quite literally, healed Eric, as it was the only way for him to reach a somewhat normal state. Lengthy court hearings began, and month after month, the situation became more complicated. Lawyers appeared. Then Viola's accomplice was arrested, and he revealed everything to have his sentence reduced. Viola had nowhere to hide. She confessed to everything, and when it all came to light, she found herself in a deadlock. She faced the fact that all evidence was against her. It was too late to confess, but she still did, hoping that her sentence could be slightly reduced. However, it turned out that her sentence was so enormous that she would barely leave prison alive. Her accomplice received an even longer sentence than her because he had more proven crimes. When this couple ended up behind bars, Christian suddenly felt lighter. By that time, his father had already taken custody of the baby, having only one nanny, and he was doing a great job taking care of the child himself. Whenever Christian came home, he immediately stopped working, let the nanny go, and spent time with the boy, enjoying fatherhood. Christian felt a pang of envy towards the baby because his father had never treated him the same way. "You know, Christian, I wasn't a good father when you were little. I loved your mother, but I was a terrible person. I couldn't control myself. Now, when I look at myself in the past, I feel ashamed," said Mr. Eric. "And I could have done something good. I could have kept our family together. I could have done everything to keep your mother alive. After all, she was the only one who truly loved me. The past cannot be undone. It's useless to regret something that cannot be changed," calmly said Christian, who still felt pain whenever the topic of his mother was brought up. "You know, for me, all those affairs were like trophies. I enjoyed the fact that I could have almost any woman. offer some money, and she would immediately jump into bed with me. What pleasure it brought me wasn't so much the process itself, but the result of how many women I had conquered. And what did I achieve in the end? Some bitch almost poisoned me. And as a result, they almost froze my son to death in a snowdrift, said Eric, summarizing everything he had done. I believe it's never too late to grow up. I've decided that I need to mature now. I think I'm finally ready to become a responsible family man, despite my age. I hope you'll forgive me and invite me to your wedding. And I hope we won't have such conflicts between us in the future, the ones I caused. Forgive me, son. I won't forgive you because I wasn't mad at you in the first place. I was angry at you, thinking that I could accept the woman you chose, accept your way of life. But I couldn't. I don't blame you for anything. Mom got seriously ill, and her illness had nothing to do with how you treated her. Besides, she unconditionally loved you and forgave you for everything, which I still can't fully understand, said Christian. He picked up his little brother, and upon seeing him, the baby immediately smiled. Christian suddenly felt a strong desire to become a father himself. He held his brother close, thinking about how he had held him the same way when he was just a tiny baby, rushing through the snowy streets, leaping over snowdrifts to reach the police station as quickly as possible. This little one didn't know the story of his rescue, and he probably never would. He would grow up in a loving family, well provided for in every way. A happy life awaited him, where he wouldn't have to worry about anything. He would receive a good education, choose any profession he desired, and not have to worry about earning a living. I want him to grow up happy, Eric said. I may not have been a worthy father to you, but I'll at least try to be a worthy father to him. And you're still so young. I still have time to mend our relationship too. Exactly. I'm glad that you finally listened to me, that on that day when you stood at the gate, you finally paid attention to what I had to say. Even though I've managed to spoil your mood quite a bit in the meantime. Christian chuckled. Now they stood over the cradle, watching the baby who joyfully smiled and grabbed his own feet. He looked at his father and brother, not yet understanding how these two people had completely changed his life. One had saved him, pulling him out of the snowdrift, almost freezing, and the other would give him a carefree life until the end of his days. This little baby didn't yet know about the happy life he would lead, about going to school, attending university, and starting his own business. He was blissfully lying in his crib, laughing, looking at his bearded father and his very young brother. And he was simply happy to be with them.